Grazie Fabio. You have made my life not easier by having this negative overture here, because my job is actually to spread some optimism here, which for a German is almost impossible by birth, but I'll try. I speak on behalf of a scientific advisory board on a particular decarbonization strategy and the role it plays for the Italian economy and Italian industry in particular, and I'm glad to have at least 3 of my fellow colleagues for which I'm having the honor to speak today in the room. There is Emma Marcegaglia, there is Stefano Veniere, and somewhere out there is Valerio, and I should also mention that Claudio Descalcio and the former Latvian Energy Commissioner Andris Pilbaks, we formed the team to advise Ambrosetti on this study. Why do we think it's important today, and why does it contain a positive element? And I'll start here. This is actually a negative chart, because what it says is that the future in Europe for industrial production is going to be much more difficult given the framework we have in the ETS system. Without focusing too much on this chart, what we know about the future is that the emission of CO2 becomes every day more and more expensive by design. That's what the ETS was planning to do, make CO2 more expensive, and then people, because they're very economical, will save and cut down their CO2. Which is a wonderful policy, but not if you're in the hard-to-abate industries like cement, steel, and others, where it's physically sometimes impossible to bring down the amount of CO2 that you put out. And this puts industry in every European country, but also in Italy, at a risk. It's at peril, and how big that risk is, we want to show on the next slide. About 18.9 or roughly 20% of the Italian industrial output is in the hard-to-abate industries, for which ETS system and the consequential costs is a really life-threatening system. Or to put it in numbers, we reckon that Ambrosetti that it's around about 94 billion euros per year that are at risk in value added, and about 1.25 million jobs. That's a large number. And the question that we gave ourselves at Ambrosetti was, cosa devi fare? What do we have to do? And it follows the main study that was done by Ambrosetti last year, where we set out a very broad map of what can be done in Europe to decarbonize our continent without endangering the industrial output and the industrial jobs. And already last year in the sort of mothership study, if I can call it, we figured out that CCS is one of the main levers that we can use, the carbon capture and storage, to help the hard-to-abate industry and at the same time to achieve the goals of decarbonization. And this chart is maybe very important because it shows that carbon capture and storage helps us on 4 fronts. It's the process emissions outside the burning of fossil fuels, for instance in cement production, where it, by the law of physics, just happens to be emitted. And it helps us, of course, when we burn fossil fuels, like gas and other primary energy carriers to produce electricity. It also helps us to make the production of hydrogen from fossil fuels clean. And let's not forget, Italy is not only a very strong industrial economy, it's also a big agricultural economy. And in agriculture, the only way you can deal with the CO2 that comes from agriculture is to cause somewhere in the economy negative emissions to counterbalance it and come out at zero. Again, we think that CCS is the thing to do. But Ambrosetti didn't just listen to its own scientific advice. We also looked at what the International Energy Agency is saying, what IPCC is saying, and they are, and I think these are trustworthy bodies in the decarbonization discourse. They also say we have to do worldwide, in Europe and in Italy, and of course in Germany and Holland and other countries, we have to do more carbon capture and storage, because the net effect is good. And what you see in the 2 boxes in the right half is that also the EU Commission has changed tack dramatically. at the beginning of the decade, they said, yeah, it's something we could do, but they didn't really take it as seriously as they do now. And almost unnoticed by the broad public in this current year, in the realms of the Net Zero Industrial Act, the EU formulated a hard target that we have to implement. And believe it or not, even the German climate and economics minister said, okay, we're going to try and do CCS in Germany, of all countries. But this is something you should take home. CCS is a serious, serious attempt to get our economy decarbonized without causing damage. We even think that it might be beneficial, and I'll come to that in a short second. So this is the work that we've done out of the mothership study last year, this year. And I'm thanking Gerardo and Giorgia and Corrado and many others at Ambrosetti for having done a tremendous work in a very short amount of time. This is the study you find on your seat and on your table in front, and which undermines why CCS is good for Italy, why it is good for the Italian industry, why Italy may even have a leading function in the application of CCS, and why it might create a supply chain business that Italy can also use for selling to other countries in Europe. There are three things that I want you to take home out of that study. And it has to do with what we called internally the myth busting. A lot of people out there say, oh, CCS, it's not safe. They pump the CO2 in the ground and then the whole thing explodes. First of all, CO2 is unexplodable. Under normal conditions, it cannot explode. The stuff that was in the cavern that we brought up, which is not CO2 but CH4, that's explosive. So whenever the NIMBY discussions come, one of the things we have to let people know is CO2 in underground caverns in storages is not dangerous. And it was confounded by all the studies that Ambrosetti, together with Eni and Snam, was evaluating as a 99.9 security level, that the storage of CO2 is a very safe way of decarbonizing an economy. So it's safe. The second thing, it's cost competitive. We reckon that over the last 20 years, the price of emitting a ton of CO2 will go way above 140, maybe even above 200 and 240 euros per ton. Whilst at the same time, the cost of storing and capturing CO2 goes down from currently 123 euros to around 94, 95. So not only is it safe, it's also cost effective. You can make money by storing and by capturing and storing CCS. And that's a message we have to bring into the capital markets, because investment is needed for these large installations, for this infrastructure that we need, but it's a business. CCS is not a necessity, it's also a business where you can make money. And the last of the three things I want you to take home, safety, cost effectiveness, that it's available. CCS is not a pie-in-the-sky thing that we need to innovate in, or first of all, invent and then innovate. It is there, it's a proven technology. And I want you to briefly look on this map. Most of it at the moment is in the north of Europe, mostly the United Kingdom. The light blue ones are the ones under construction. The two countries that are already operating things and are partially servicing my country, Germany, in the next couple of years are Norway, where we had a binding contract, and Iceland. And there is one dot down in the Mediterranean where it's not just planning but under construction. That's in Italy. It's in Ravenna. So we have a bifurcated market in Europe. We have Northern Europe, which will serve some northern regions and probably the Scandinavian countries, but in the Mediterranean, with proximity to Austria, Croatia, Hungary, the south of France and Spain, there is only Italy at the moment as a viable option. And therefore, I want you to focus on the Ravenna CCS operation that will come online in the first quarter of 2024. It is, from a cost effectiveness and from a technology point of view, a unique spot. It's close to the industrial hubs of the northern Italy, dense industrial areas, but it's also close to Austria, it's close to South Germany. We have a huge CO2 problem in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, where all the automotive and engineering industry is. And therefore, this is the Ravenna hub is something that should not only be paid attention to in Italy for its own Italian industry, but also for its neighboring industrial countries. And The question, how much could Ravenna help to be a solution, is illustrated on that chart here. The hard-to-abate sectors of the Italian industry roughly emit around 64 million tons of CO2 every year. And roughly half of it can be captured and stored in CCS technology that we think is available. And half of the half, i.e. 25% of Italy's annual output in an ideal world, can be captured by the Ravenna hub. And I'm sure in the background talks with journalists, both Eni and Snam and Brosetti will give you more details on that. But the thing is, we think that the economic net benefit of Ravenna alone is warranting it. But the penultimate slide is it will create jobs. It will not just simply preserve jobs, it will also create jobs. And therefore, one thing that you should see is the market around Italy in Europe is huge. And it's a market that Italy, if it imposes as a supply chain, an industrial approach, is huge and can benefit the whole Italian economy. And my two last slides, don't go into the details, is the next step that we need in Italy and in Europe to get the right regulations done, get the definitions out, because who can capture which kind of CO2, in which pipelines will it put where, all this needs to be regulated. That's all I wanted to tell you. And I hope I was able to spread a little bit of industrial technological optimism. Thank you very much, grazie. And now we can go back to Italian.